And we're going to begin the day with a very important energy session. We're expecting Minister Skylakakis, who's stuck in traffic on the way here, but will be here shortly. So my suggestion is that we get the session underway. We're going to hear a video message from the former US Ambassador to Greece, Geoffrey Pyatt, now US Assistant Secretary of State for Energy Resources at the Bureau of Energy Resources in the US Department of State. We'll show that video message in a moment, but maybe I can ask all my other panelists to join me on the stage. We'll keep a seat here for the minister when he arrives, but I will call you up, and if you can all take a seat. I think we have 8 seats here. That's enough for everybody. So let me first welcome Viktor Parlicov, Minister of Energy of Moldova. Welcome, Minister. Osama Mobarez, Secretary General of the East Mediterranean Gas Forum. Welcome, an old friend, the conference. And we have a very prestigious panel of business leaders. Matthew Bryza, former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs and the former US Ambassador to Azerbaijan, now a member of the Board of Directors of Overgas. Welcome. Fabrizio Matana, CEO of IGI Poseidon. Welcome. Maria Rita Gali, CEO of DESFA. Welcome, Maria. Aristoteles Hantavas, CEO of Principia, President of Solar Power Europe. Welcome. And last but not least, Antonis Metaxas, Managing Partner of Metaxas and Associates Law Firm. So we'll proceed with the video, with the message from Geoffrey Pyatt. In the meantime, the minister should arrive and we'll get the speeches underway. So yes, please show the video. Thank you.
Kalimera. It's a real honor to join everybody today, and my only regret is I'm not there in person out in Lagonisi. I'm especially pleased to be part of this particular panel alongside Minister Skylakakis, Minister Parlicov, and EMGF Secretary General Mobarez, good friends all. The changing energy landscape of Southeast Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean is a subject at the heart of my agenda here in ENR, reflecting a lot of the work that I was able to do as ambassador in Athens. More importantly, it takes up a growing amount of time for our whole team here at the State Department's Energy Bureau. With Greece at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and North Africa, the region's importance has become even more self-evident in all facets of my Bureau's work on the energy trilemma: energy security, energy sustainability, and energy affordability. Greece's expanding LNG and regasification capacity, for instance, remains critical to promoting and enhancing European energy security. New projects like the Vertical Corridor will help to diversify not only gas supplies, but also natural gas routes while promoting the connectivity and cooperation which underpin any truly resilient energy markets. Greece's rapidly expanding domestic renewables deployment, a model lauded frequently by European officials in Brussels, will provide affordable, secure energy for the Greek public. But it also supports Greece's ambition to become a significant clean energy exporter to the Western Balkans and Central Europe, bringing jobs to Greece and cleaner and cheaper energy to the whole region. Greece's tremendous potential in offshore wind, something Minister Skylakakis and I discussed in New York a few months ago, both as a producer through the Aegean's bountiful and consistent winds, as well as a manufacturer with projects like the Elefsina offshore wind hub, is an exciting area of additional transatlantic cooperation. The United States, Europe, and our allies and partners are committed to working together to build safe, secure supply chains for the clean energy inputs and critical minerals needed for our energy transition. Beyond its domestic plans, Greece is positioning itself as the critical node for regional clean energy connectivity through projects like the Green Aegean Interconnector, the Great Sea Interconnector, a top item in my recent meeting with Cypriot Foreign Minister Kombos here in Washington, GREGI, GAP, and other power interconnection projects. Greece, of course, is also a leading member of the 3+1 group, alongside Israel and the Republic of Cyprus. The United States, as the +1 in this group, strongly supports the collaboration among these neighbors. Each of the panelists this morning, and many of you in the audience, know well that collaboration on energy has helped to redefine relationships in the region over the past decade and has become a leading element of the US-Greece alliance. During my time in Athens, I worked hard for greater ties on energy across this region and continue to do so today from ENR. If we continue to tirelessly pursue physical connectivity and projects that support and facilitate this energy collaboration, as I know Ambassador Sunis and his team are doing every day, I have no doubt that the energy abundance of Southeast Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean will help to solve the energy trilemma for all of Europe and the wider region, and will foster a secure, affordable, and sustainable energy system for the whole region and beyond. I wish you a great discussion and look forward to seeing everybody all again in person before too long. Kalokeri, Evharisopoli.
Okay, good as always to hear from the former ambassador to Greece, Geoffrey Pyatt. I suggest we move on with the panel, not to waste any time. So I'd like to introduce to everybody the Minister of Energy of Moldova, Victor Parlicov. Great to have you with us. And if you can give some opening remarks about where Moldova finds itself now in the face of this kind of geopolitical storm that we've been facing over the past few years.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting. And indeed, in many respects, Moldova is an interesting case of a very rapid transition and transformation as a result of all the crises that we experienced in the last period. On the geopolitical thing, on the geopolitical part, but also how the repercussions on the energy. Just 2-3 years ago, we were a country 100% dependent on one contract for gas supply from Gazprom, zero experience importing any gas resources from other places. And everybody's talking about gas, but for our region and for the countries, for our two countries, for Ukraine and Moldova, the biggest transformation and the biggest shift that allowed us, including diversification, enabled us to diversify in the gas side, was actually coming in the electricity. And few people understand the amount, the magnitude and the profoundness of the transformation for us of the synchronization of the grids. When Ukraine and Moldova were allowed to synchronize with NSOE, we basically became part of the European electricity system, and that has changed a lot. When in November 2022, we had basically a so-called, what I call it, perfect storm, organized to us by the Russian Federation. We had limited supplies of gas. The power plant that was in the territory controlled by the Russian Federation in Transnistria refused to supply electricity. The Ukrainian system was under bombardment. We didn't have electricity to bring in. We could not rely on it, and still, and the prices were at the historical maximum. It is the synchronization, and it is the connection with ENTSO-E that maintained lights in Moldova on when entire regions of Ukraine were stuck without electricity for months, 4 weeks at least. So one thing I can say is that the transformation has come as a result, yes, of a crisis, which we did not start, but second, because of the unprecedented mobilization and solidarity between the countries in the region. And maybe for the first time in our history, Moldova is now in a situation of a country that is contributing to the regional security of energy supplies because of the vertical corridor, because we were the first country that managed to and demonstrated the technical and the economic feasibility of the vertical corridor and bringing gas from Greece to the Western Ukrainian gas storage facilities. Basically, we're proposing and we are offering, technically proving the case for a business model that previously was only available for Gazprom, where they were filling in the gas storage facilities in Western Ukraine in summer, and they were the only ones who could quickly increase the gas supply in Central Europe in wintertime. So all this is possible, again, only due to infrastructure investments. But now we are experiencing challenges in financing some of this infrastructure. For instance, gas infrastructure, everybody understands the vertical corridor needs to expand its capacity, but the financing of investments in the gas sector, particularly by the European Union, is linked to proving the feasibility of decarbonization, of its contribution to decarbonization. If you cannot prove a case, for instance, for a hydrogen, which realistically is difficult to do because of the technology, it's difficult to finance these projects. Now we're stuck. Everybody understands we need to increase this throughput capacity, and at the same time, the conditions for financing it are not prone to doing it. But other than that, what I must say is that as a country, we are an example of what can be done in a very short time. And we're an example of what can be achieved through solidarity in the region. And the Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Moldova, Ukraine corridor, not just on the gas, but also the interconnections that we're building on electricity, will help bring Moldova and Ukraine not just politically into the European Union, but also more importantly, what we've discussed yesterday at the dinner, part of the energy market. Will make Moldova and Ukraine part of the energy market, which will radically change the landscape.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. And yeah, incredible transition that's taken place in Moldova, and probably exceeding everybody's expectations, because there were so many fears a few years ago about Moldova being completely cut off. So just one quick follow-up there, because you were really emphasizing the importance of the infrastructure development and the problem now being one of financing. So what would you say is the solution here?
Well, there's two possible solutions only. Either private sector steps in, and we're not waiting for, let's say, EU-driven investments, institutional investments. But this is probably be better to hear from Mrs. Gali, because she knows better how it works and what is possible and what is not possible for them. And of course, it's different from one country to the other. But the other solution would be to just revise the eligibility and the criteria for financing such infrastructure projects at the EU level. Realistically, again, everyone understands it's a must-have. Practically, we are stuck in procedures.
Yeah. Okay, we'll come back to that, I'm sure, in the discussion. So let's move on, and let me introduce Osama Mobarez, Secretary General of the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum. Welcome again.
Thank you, John. It's really a pleasure for me to be back to this great event. And I think I will very briefly tackle three topics. One is the importance of gas. And second is the importance of collaboration, especially in facing the multiple challenges that we're facing. And the third one about financing. So I think gas is playing and will play a significant role. And we have heard this from Prime Minister Mitsotakis in the dinner yesterday about how can gas overcome the trilemma that Ambassador Pyatt was talking about. It's better to use and switch to gas than coal. And definitely gas, although it is a fossil fuel, but it is the cleanest fossil fuel. Not just that, but we have a lot of technologies that can make gas even cleaner. And I think this is one of our focus points at the EMGF. We're focusing on developing more gas from the Eastern Mediterranean to support diversification of Europe, especially in these times of crisis and challenges. Not just that, but we're trying to produce more gas in a more responsible way through a lot of technologies, a lot of projects to decarbonize and reduce emissions. So this is one thing. Another thing, we're trying to do this through a lot of collaborative platforms and collaborative mechanisms. And I think the EMGF, one of its characteristics is that it is not just about the governments, but we have the governments, we have the industry, we have the regulators and the technology companies. So I think bringing the different stakeholders together is a very important platform for collaboration, especially facing all the challenges, whether geopolitical, whether the climate challenge, or even the energy security and the trilemma that we are facing. The last point is financing. So I think the global world is having a lot of ambitious targets, especially when we're talking about economic growth and also about climate action. But I think it's good to have ambitious targets, it's good to have a vision, but also we need to have concrete plans to achieve this. And I think one of the main obstacles is financing. And the good thing is in the past 2 years, let's say, the narrative about the fossil fuels and about gas in particular has been changing. People now, and the political narrative is accepting the gas and the role of gas, but what's really challenging is the availability of financing and funding. Really to make gas or to have the contribution of gas in the facing the trilemma, we need a lot of funding, not just to develop and produce gas, but as we have been discussing about the infrastructure, the interconnectivity. And we still see a lot of constraints from the financing institutes in funding and availing funds for gas projects and gas infrastructure. So I think this is an important topic that we need to address, not just funding for gas, but also funding the ambitions about the climate challenge and the climate change. And I think the COP28 achieved a great milestone in this regard, creating the funds for this, but still I think it's a long way to go. Hopefully in COP29, we can achieve further milestones and we can see a breakthrough in this regard.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I think already 3 very clear themes are emerging here about the importance of developing infrastructure, developing interconnectivity, and financing being, even if the narrative changed, we can discuss a bit further, how much it has changed, that narrative. But yeah, these are all big questions that I think we'll be discussing on the panel. So thanks very much for that. Let's move on then and listen to some of the other contributions. So Matthew Bryza, former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, welcome. Now a member of the Board of Directors of Overgas, which is, I understand, probably the biggest, is it, Bulgarian private company in natural gasification infrastructure.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's it. To be modest, I mean, the private sector in Bulgaria for natural gas distribution is not huge, and that's a problem. And that's actually the theme. The theme of government and private sector working together is one I'd like to maybe synthesize the comments of Minister Parlicov and Secretary General Mobarez. Because, well, when I started getting involved in this part of the world, it was all about the US government leading an effort with some private companies like BP, state companies like SOCAR, TPAO, to develop corridors for natural gas and oil from the Caspian Sea to Europe via Georgia and Turkey. And you know, when government people draw lines on maps for infrastructure projects that make geopolitical sense, they don't always make commercial sense. And I'm looking at my dear friend, brilliant former foreign minister of Armenia, Vartan Oskanyan, who's sitting here in the second row. And we worked together for years trying to help Azerbaijan and Armenia reach a peace agreement over the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. And I think we're very, very close to, or they're very, very close to that agreement. But unfortunately, when the geopolitical lines for pipelines were drawn back then, Armenia was excluded at the behest of Azerbaijan and Turkey. And now in the Eastern Mediterranean, Turkey is excluded from a lot of the deliberations on how to get Eastern Mediterranean gas to Europe. And a lot of that grew out of the fact that, remember, in the summer of 2020, Turkey became quite aggressive in asserting what it views as its rights, territorial rights, its exclusive economic zone as well in the Eastern Mediterranean, but now is quieting things down. So governments have an idea of what the line should look like on a map. Sometimes that creates cooperation, sometimes it creates conflict. The key is to develop the projects in ways that make commercial sense, in partnership with governments leading maybe the negotiations to line up the international agreements that'll facilitate the projects, and then the private sector executing. The pipelines from the Caspian Sea through Georgia and Turkey now, which became on the gas side, the Southern Corridor, worked commercially. We worked very closely with the companies and financiers to come up with models that would allow successful projects. Greece is doing the same. What DESFA has done in terms of implementing transparency in transactions of natural gas imports in the multiple now, more than one LNG import terminal that there will be in Greece, is really a model for the rest of the European Union. Where our company is in Bulgaria, we have a great difficulty with transparency. On pricing of natural gas, great difficulty getting access, direct access to natural gas purchases, using the infrastructure that exists connecting Turkey to Bulgaria, because there's an oversized, outsized role of Bulgaria's state natural gas monopoly, Bulgargas, which is able to exert all kinds of pricing leverage that manipulates the market. It makes it very, very difficult for a private sector company like Bulgargas, no matter how relatively large it is, to prosper financially. So last point is, there's a chance to expand this vertical corridor and even bring it to the side a little bit by increasing the natural gas interconnectivity between Turkey and Bulgaria. It can increase back, it's now at 3 BCM. It could go up to 15. It's the old north-south line from the Soviet days. It could return to its full previous capacity of 15 BCM. But there needs to be financing on the Bulgarian side. The money is not there in the state coffers because the state gas monopoly is technically bankrupt. There needs to be EU support, but it's only going to work with private sector financing if that additional capacity from Turkey to Bulgaria is open to competitive bidding for the private sector. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So, yeah, another theme there emerging of the importance of governments and private sector coordination. Next up, we have Fabrizio Mazzana, CEO of IGI Poseidon. Welcome again, Matthew. Fabrizio, sorry.
Yep. Thank you all. Well, I had in mind to touch 2 points, but then Matthew, I think that put on the table a very important topic, following also what Mr. Mobarez said before about cooperation and feasibility of project. But before going to that, and that is very much linked with the future of East Mediterranean connection to Europe, just one point on what has been said about transition and how the energy landscape is adapting. Because I think that we have been talking a lot last year about transition, And we have been very shy in stressing the role of gas, while today I'm happy to hear that gas is still very important, is recognized as being very important, and this is the result also of the geopolitical crisis that we lived, because energy is the variable, one of the key variable to set also the risk profile of the countries, and after the geopolitical crisis, we stressed two very important questions. Is the energy available? So do we have it? And how much does it cost? And this impact the risk profile of the countries, the industrial growth of the countries, and this is why gas is back, because it's true all the countries, all the companies are moving toward net zero path. That's the target for everybody, but this has been set as a big statement, but then we have to face reality in terms of timing, in terms of feasibility, in terms of commercial feasibility, in terms of affordability. And this is the framework in which energy landscape is moving. And I think that the energy sector reacted and is reacting very well. In my opinion, the only direction that is reasonable and feasible, that is diversification. And diversification is a wide concept. I'm not just speaking about gas, but diversification in energy is renewables first, fossil gas because we need it and we have it and is affordable, is a path toward green gases, and to do all of that, we need infrastructures. And then we are back to, my job and the job of someone around this table, infrastructure to create, to develop, and to realize infrastructure. I fully agree with what you said. We need cooperation. And the more complex the project is, the more cooperation we need. I think that IGI Poseidon, from the company I represent, gave an example of realizing a project through cooperation that is exactly close to your area, is the interconnection between Greece and Bulgaria, IHB. That was key. The rationale was diversification, and it was realized thanks to cooperation among countries, among companies, through partnership. So we can do it. East Mediterranean is the new challenge, but it's the big opportunity. Because I think that for Greece, for Europe, there is one area that is not yet interconnected, that has huge potential, that is a reliable supplier that is not in the picture now. And we have all we studied a lot around this project, this interconnection, and we can see the link with East Mediterranean area as the missing energy corridor. We're not talking about only gas pipelines. We're talking about an energy corridor that is missing and can provide reliable energy that today is probably not yet zero CO2, but in the future could be green gases, renewables, and a real stable bilateral link between EastMed and Europe.
Good morning, Minister. Please take a seat. Thanks, Fabrizio. Was that concluding your remarks for the introduction? Well, thanks very much. So, welcome, Minister. And we got started without you. Apologies for that, but we thought we might run too late if we waited. So just let me fill you in a little bit. We've been hearing from our speakers. We had a very nice video message from Geoffrey Pyatt, as you know. Played a very big role and continues to play a very big role in US and Greek relations, and in particular in this energy field. We heard from the Minister of Energy of Moldova, Viktor Parlicov, about the incredible transition in terms of energy security and supply in Moldova, and this now wholesale a shift in orientation between Moldova and Europe. And we heard from Secretary General Mobarez from the East Mediterranean Gas Forum about the importance of infrastructure, connectivity, financing. In fact, that's been the theme of most of the speakers. I think everybody's really emphasized that, the importance of infrastructure development, interconnections, cooperation and collaboration between governments and private sector, and financing being a problem. We've got more of our panelists, but maybe I want to hand over now to you to make your remarks, and then we'll continue with the panelists, and hopefully we'll have time for a short Q&A.
Well, I would start saying that we have to understand that these interconnections that we are building, either interconnections for gases or interconnections for electric energy, are essentially the building blocks of the creation of a more unified energy market. There can be no energy market that is unified unless we have these interconnections. Now, within Europe, this is not just something that a nice to have. It's an absolute necessity for the European economic space to be a unified economic space, as it is supposed to be. Without interconnections, there is a major flaw in the European economic zone. And this has been, in fact, a major flaw in the way the European economic policy functions. Now, the second difficulty that we have with these interconnections is that they are very long-term investments. An interconnection will last far longer than the actual period that the private enterprise that undertakes it will take its money back. And this is a problem with energy in general, but in interconnections, it's even more important. An interconnection, let's say an electrical cable, can last 50 years, while its payout period can be 20 or 25. This is a major market deficiency. That's why we have to be present as a state to promote these interconnections and help these interconnections be realized. And this also, and this adds, these are the economic arguments. Now, we have to add also the geopolitical arguments. We are living in an era where things that we considered as self-evident no longer stand. Peace in Europe is no longer self-evident. International trade is no longer self-evident. Security in the seas is no longer self-evident. You see what happens in the Red Sea. You see what happened in Ukraine. You see what happens between the big international players in terms of trade and tariffs. So in this era, energy security is much more important. And energy security for us will be created and is created by huge amounts of renewables that we are developing. Because renewables, after you develop them, absolutely belong to you. Nobody can take them. In fact, they're much more robust in terms of even, as we've seen in Ukraine, of even someone that would like to destroy them. And they have no fuel. The fuel comes from the sun in one way or another, excluding geothermal. Geothermal, not necessarily. It can be from the previous sun. Exactly. But what we have to realize is that building this new infrastructure that will give us full energy security, we need both for economic reasons and for geopolitical reasons. We need both fast development of renewables, we are one of the first in the world there, and fast development of interconnections. And I believe in the last 5 years, we also are one of the major players, even longer, in developing interconnections. Thus, we can only consider ourselves a positive force in this energy security, from the energy security aspect.
Thank you. Thanks very much indeed. Now, let's carry on with the panel. And I think you summarized very well this combination of the geopolitical imperatives driving this transition and the economic ones. I guess the theme so far is not just renewables, but in a way, gas is back. It's the kind of, in some of the messages where a year ago, maybe that wasn't the narrative at all, but the importance of gas in this transition period is probably recognized much more now than it was a year ago. So who better to tell us a bit more about that than Maria Rita Galli from DESFA.
Thank you, John. And well, it's a pleasure to speak after, let's say, the speakers who were before me, because most of the topics that have been raised are very crucial to the role that we believe natural gas infrastructures are playing in the region. Let's start from renewables, because let's say I would like to start from a different angle for a while, and it's let's say it's incredible how really we can see in Greece an effective and successful cooperation between renewable and gas. We can see it on a daily basis. In Greece, we have days in which wind and solar represent more than 60% of the total energy production. And that, of course, is an extreme success. And this extreme success is made possible by the fact that the day after, when there is no wind and sometimes also the sun is a little bit, foggy with the sand from the desert, unfortunately, 60% of this electricity is produced by natural gas. So we have really a cooperation and integration between these two sources of energy, and the infrastructure are the enabler of this cooperation because they represent let's say, the physical storage for this form of energy that is gas. So let's say what we are really experiencing is how, let's say, the technology that today is available and reliable to increase the penetration of renewable is and still is natural gas. And of course, natural gas will have to decarbonize itself, will have to find better ways to be part of the energy mix, reducing its environmental impact, but for sure is allowing the decarbonization by integrating more renewables, while at the same time guaranteeing the stability of the system. Talking about infrastructures and how infrastructure are critical in this period of geopolitical crisis, well, we all remember 2022, Greece was already in a very positive situation when the crisis happened because had invested significantly in the past with the expansion of the Revitusa terminal and also with the TAP connection. But and this has enabled the country to play a super important role in 2022, not only for itself, but for the neighboring countries, starting from Bulgaria. And in 1 year, we imported almost 80 cargos of LNG, and we reduced physically the import of Russian gas practically to zero. 2022 has been, for me, also a very significant year in terms of public-private cooperation in promoting the development of further infrastructure, because very rapidly a significant investment have been approved, and the cooperation is between the private sector, companies like DESFA, and the public, the ministry, the regulator who have approved this infrastructure as part of the national gas transmission system, thus enabling us to already deploy significant capital investment in compressor stations, the new interconnector with North Macedonia, and the compressor stations which are under constructions, and that by the mid of next year will allow Greece to be able to export and to feed the vertical corridor with 8.5 billion cubic meter of different sources of gas. Always at the end of 22, we signed the memorandum for the vertical corridor, and January this year we extended the memorandum to Moldova, Ukraine, and Slovak. So let's say a big progress has been made to make it happen. Of course, it doesn't mean that the problem has been solved, and we need to remain very much aware that the situation in which we operate is very volatile, and we have experienced in the last few months a complete and a second complete revolution of the flows. And as a matter of fact, in this moment, Greece is importing almost 60% of Russian gas. We have a lot of Russian gas in Southeast Europe, which is sold at very cheap prices, and this is, let's say, creating huge obstacle to importers of LNG. And this is creating obstacle to the development and the financiability of projects like Vertical Corridor, because the market players are not willing to take long-term commitment, both because of course, uncertainty about the role of gas, but also in the short, medium term about the sustainability of the level of prices. So let's say the effort that, again, the private and the public sector will have to make in the next few months is to make sure that we can overcome this short-term volatility, because investment infrastructure are long-term investment. We cannot decide on the basis of short-term prices. We cannot decide betting that this cheap Russian gas will keep flooding Southeast Europe. And so let's say even if Greece is certainly in a much stronger situation than it used to be, but much stronger than many of the neighboring countries, we need to look at the region as a whole, and it's really important that these investments find a way to be financed. And the success of Greece needs to be reproduced in other countries of Southeast Europe with the same degree, and I appreciate what was said about the transparency of the regulatory framework, the fact that in Greece, you know which is the source of gas and where the gas is coming and going.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maria. Next, we have Aristotelis Hantavas, President of Solar Power Europe and CEO of Principia.
Hello. Thank you for having me here. It's not that common for me to be at a panel with so many times expressing the word gas. But let me differentiate a bit and adhere a bit more to the opinions of Minister Skylakakis. I think that, as also the title of the panel implies, geopolitics is very important. And when we talk about investments in gas and corridors and pipelines, geopolitical stability is one of the key parameters that we should consider. And unfortunately, we live in a world, and especially in an area of this globe, that this is not taken for granted. Instead, we have developed in the last decades some other alternatives in generating electricity. And this is renewables, which is faster, it's cleaner, and cheaper now. And at the same time, it's also assuring geopolitical stability, because you generate in your own country the electricity you want. What we could see also recently in the last 5 years is that after the Russian invasion in Ukraine, this became more evident, being somehow subject to the desires of a nation to electrify your needs and your people is not maybe the wisest choice. So in our point of view, we should use this Russian war as an example and as an incentive to accelerate further all our efforts towards the energy transition. What does it mean? More renewables. And that's why also you see a big difference in terms of interests of financing such projects. I mean, it's not comparable, especially in Greece. With the efforts of the government, we have seen a tremendous interest of investors to invest in renewables. And renewables also have proven that they can supply almost all the energy that a nation needs, as long as they utilize the contribution of supportive infrastructure, such as storage. And this is where we are today, in my point of view. The ministry has realized the importance of storage infrastructure. The ministry, as far as we know from press releases, is examining seriously the acceleration of storage infrastructure in the country, which combined with renewables can solve the problem. In this sense, this is something that for sure we could have done better in the past. We could be more aggressive and faster so that we don't face today issues like the curtailments that affect the investors' trusts in renewables. But at the same time, I think that we are in a very good momentum to take the right decisions to accelerate the penetration of storage in the system that will make sure that renewables can supply the majority of electricity in a nation. For sure, we need gas today, but for sure, the only way would be to accelerate the alternatives we have towards gas.
Thank you very much for that. Finally, Antonis Metaxas, we'd like to hear your comments on what you've heard already, and of course, anything important that you see in terms of the legal and regulatory framework.
I will be very brief. Thank you very much, John. And somehow make also an introduction to the next panel. I think the key issues, it's very nice to be here again, and I would like also to congratulate again Nectaria and her team for having a wonderful organization again. So I think the basic issues have been raised. We're talking about connectivity, financing, and of course, infrastructure. When we're talking, for example, about the penetration of renewables, as Mr. Handavas rightly pointed out, we need infrastructure. We need networks, and we need also storage. So networks are perhaps the most important thing for the years to come, and because they are very much related and directly linked to actual problems that also investors are facing, because, for example, Mr. Handavas rightly pointed out the phenomenon of increased curtailments here in Greece. Curtailments are a very important issue because it actually undermines any kind of investor safety, because without investor safety, we cannot realize anything from what has been mentioned until now. So, and we don't have rules, clear rules, transparent rules for this kind of phenomena that are indeed often nowadays. And this brings me also to something that Mr. Bryza correctly pointed out, which is more or less also a problem that also other states are facing in other energy markets, not just Bulgaria. We need legal rules, just to refer also to my specialization. We want a clear regulatory framework. We need legal safety, meaning if we have a phenomenon such as curtailments, for example, we cannot have rules that are retroactively adopted for a phenomenon that already exists and for measures that the network operators already adopt without having clear rules, but the rules will be adopted. That means that also the legislator has to, also at European level, but also at national level, has to adopt and be more let's say, proactive, because without clear rules, without clear and transparent framework, you cannot have the important investments as regards network infrastructure, be it in gas infrastructure, be it in electricity, interconnection facilities. I think these are the basic issues that have to be properly assessed, and I hope, and let us be optimistic, that also, as I said, the legislature understands what are the necessary preconditions for bringing investments. And last but not least, I have, and this is a more, let's say, I would say not just Greek perspective, but also I'm providing a European perspective, let's say. By having discussions with, we see a large optimism, again, making an introduction to the panel that will follow as regards the penetration of renewables, and we are very confident that investors are interested and still interested and will be willing to invest. I would say yes, but I see a certain, I don't know if Mr. Handavas, for example, also agrees with my statement that, and my assessment, that I witness a certain skepticism starting. What will be the electricity mix? What is the interdependence between natural gas and renewables? What are the infrastructural capacities that would enable further investment in renewables? So I think that there is a certain indication of investment skepticism. This will be my short comments.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to bring the Minister back in to hear a little bit more about the government's priorities now, a year into New Democracy's second term. What are the priority energy projects for the government in 2024 and beyond? Maybe you can also pick up on some of the themes that have been raised, in particular, about cooperation between your government, other countries in the region, including Moldova, also Western Balkans and so on, and also cooperation with the private sector also.
Well, let me first say that from what we've seen from what happened with our new cable with Bulgaria, interconnections are very important. We've just built a new cable and it's now full. It's now full, and it's days that we have exactly the same price in the two countries, the same dump price. So we need more interconnections. This is the first message. And we are working with our partners in the neighborhood, especially our northern partners, to make this a reality. Now, in terms of our priorities, what we have to do is to have a transition from a period of subsidies to a period of a functioning market in terms of renewables. Renewables are now very cheap, and even batteries are now able to be in the market without subsidies. So what we're going to do, especially in an era when we have curtailments, so what we're going to do is we're going to open up the market for batteries and let investors invest in batteries, both in a number of old photovoltaic parks that we have, and this is something that we're going to legislate in a couple of months. We will present this legislation within July, and batteries, standalone batteries, without subsidies, but with priority in terms of electrical space, because they create electrical space. So this is a new development that we're going to have, and we're also going to have, in order to make investors' life easier, we're going to cut the money, the guarantee that they have to give to be in the queue by 70%. So this will enable them to be in this long queue that we have with less expenses, because the renewables market is going to be a market for long-term players. It's not going to be a market where people come and get easy money and get out. So this has to be helped by our government so that players are enabled to be more long-term players, since the demand for electricity will increase, but it's not certain that it will increase with the rates that we expect or at the times that we expect. These are two major policy changes that we are doing right now.
Okay, I'm sure that's going to be most welcome by the investors here. Can I just ask you, you've really put the emphasis on renewables, and of course, everybody on this panel recognizes the importance of that and of decarbonizing gas as well, but we have many players here in this sector and in gas. So just in terms of that balance from your government, gas is very important for this region. We've talked during the session of the kind of missing energy corridor in this region, in the Eastern Med. So how do you see that? We've also got the problem of developing that infrastructure and the problem of financing. And particularly from the EU side, that was emphasized by the minister from Moldova, that is really blocking development now, the insistence of the EU that there has to be this renewables component to financing in this area. So that's a problem. And the other alternative obviously being private sector. So how does the government approach that issue of encouraging renewables transition, but also prioritizing gas in this region, which will continue to be really important?
We have created a second terminal, FSRU, in Alexandroupolis. It's going to become operational in the next few months, fully operational. It's now testing, and this covers more than our needs for gas only by LNG. We also have gas by pipelines, for example, Azerbaijan, and from that perspective, we are fully a positive force because we also have connected with Bulgaria. Thus, we have essentially created this corridor from our side. Now, how this corridor is going to work in the future, we are going to see. We are going to support it as much as possible. We have already done so. This FSRU that we have created, we have invested as a state in it quite a substantial amount of money. Thus, we are now from the period of creating the infrastructure to the period of letting market players take advantage of that infrastructure. We have done our job.
Okay, great, thanks. We're running out of time for the session, but I did want to give everybody, an opportunity to come back in and really talk about your priorities, what you see as the priorities and solutions here to some of the problems that have been raised and what you'd like to see. The minister says the government has done its job, but there's always more to be done, I guess. So, I'd just like to hear from each of you really about what are the most important things you'd like to see happening. So starting with you, Minister of Moldova.
Okay, what I would say is that, of course, as a result of the war, but not even before the war, of the blackmail, on the energy blackmail on behalf of Russia, and the entire landscape and the geopolitics of energy has changed in the entire Europe. I think EU has not expected how quickly it will be able to adapt and how quickly it will be able to absorb this shock. Yes, it came at a cost, but I would like to mention one particular thing that has not been discussed here, but is of extreme importance, and this is the information war and the disinformation, because a lot of the panic and a lot of the price shocks that Europe had to experience and absorb even financially was actually a result of a hyperinflation of the gas topic and gas price topic in the perception of people in the EU. And I can only give you one thing. Look at the TTF quotations around 26th and 27th of September 2022, when the Nord Stream 1 and 2 were blown up. Quotations started to go down. And they went down like hell. And that is a sign that the uncertainty with respect to Russian gas on the EU market was exaggerated compared to the certainty that there will be no Russian gas on the EU market. So there's one aspect that has not been touched is this. Another aspect that I would like to also mention is that the entire region here is now from a region that was 100% dependent on the Russian gas, or not 100, but almost entirely, is becoming a region which now feeds gas into the rest of the Europe. It was a receptor of the gas. Now it is an entry point for a lot of the gas that can be shifted into the Central Europe. And infrastructure, again, is key. There's no magic solutions. I mean, we can do whatever, but without infrastructure, the market will not function. And we experienced that in Moldova, as I said, on the electricity side and now on the gas. On our priorities list, interconnections with Romania on the electricity are top priority. We want to use these interconnections for several things. First, to integrate. We cannot integrate into the European energy market if we're not connected enough. We cannot generate electricity, renewable electricity, and use the infrastructure to balance the region market if we don't have interconnections. And Moldova simply does not have any other resource when it comes to energy generation than renewables. And three, there will be time when the reconstruction of Ukraine will start. And that reconstruction will require a lot of energy. And that energy will have to somehow reach Ukraine. And the interconnections that we're now building with Romania will make Moldova, Romania interconnectors, or Moldova probably the strongest, the biggest bridge to bring in electricity to Ukraine from EU.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mobarez, maybe we can hear what the priorities are of your organization, the EastMed Gas Forum, for the next year.
Thank you. So I think it's quite interesting to listen to the panelists from both governments and also from the private sector. And I think one key message is that there is a lot of alignment on the objectives and the way forward, which I think is quite encouraging. The collaboration between the governments and the private sector is key, as we were discussing at the beginning. And I think this also encouraged me to focus on what we are trying to do. As we discussed, we're trying to solve the trilemma through, as EMGF, focusing now on gas, and not just producing gas, but also on decarbonization. What we are trying to do in 2024 is in line with the outcome of COP28 is, let's say, the quick wins of the decarbonization of the gas, like methane emissions abatement and also gas flaring reduction, which I think are quite key. And at the same time, we're working on our plan for the carbon intensity certification, which I think is quite important to make sure that the gas is certified with its carbon footprint. So it gives assurances that the gas is low carbon and at the same time, as we're trying to do, low cost. So I think this is quite important. One other, I think, topic I would like to highlight, and it was discussed, is the critical role that Greece is playing, especially in these challenging times, connecting the East Mediterranean with Southeast Europe. Not just in gas, but also with the planned projects for electricity connectivity. I think this is going to create even a greater role for Greece in this regard.
Thank you. So just some very final brief comments now, because we are out of time from each of you.
So now that we all seem to agree on the importance of the private sector and public sector cooperating, Greece has done a great job in facilitating corridors and LNG importation and a great regulatory framework on behalf of DESFA. Then I would call for governments to show more political courage, to remove obstacles to the private sector investment. That's the only way the energy transition is going to happen. So specifically, I already mentioned the problems in Bulgaria. There are, in terms of competition in EU competition law, there are several crucial regulations that are not being implemented in Bulgaria that reduce private sector investment. I don't need to go into details. The European Commission doesn't want to rock the boat of the already unstable Bulgarian political system, 6 elections in whatever it is, 3 years. But there needs to be that courage, or else the investment's not going to happen in Bulgaria. And on electricity, at Cyprus, I used to be the US mediator on the Cyprus question. It's such a radioactive political topic. I live in Turkey. It's very, very difficult issue. However, to, let's say, increase the amount of renewables used on the island of Cyprus, because there's a lot of installed capacity, but not enough base load, the fundamental load of consistent electricity generation, not only that allows electricity to flow when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing, but also to keep the electricity grid in balance, you need constant, reliable, additional electricity flowing into the grid. The cheapest way, the simplest way to do that is the most politically difficult one, which would be an electricity connection from Turkey with a surplus of electricity. It's going to have nuclear power online. Given that the island of Cyprus already has a functioning interconnection between the north and the south through a depoliticized quasi-commercial agreement. That would be the most cost-effective way then to allow Cyprus to use much more of its installed renewable energy. But politically, there needs to be great courage to allow for such an interconnection from Turkey.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. Everybody's got 1 minute now, if we're going to finish on time. Sorry, Fabrizio.
Yeah. I'm trying to be quick. Two quick points. The first one starts from what Mr. Chautas said. Every time we are at a table, gas player and renewable player, there's a sort of race on who is the best, who is the cheapest, who will come first. And I think this has been the narrative in the last 2 years. I think we have to move from that. I think that we are all necessary and we have to focus on the point, and the point is to create a sustainable path to reduce CO2 emissions. And to do that in a stable way, in a secure way, in a competitive way, we need all of them. We still need gas, we need a lot of efforts in renewables, we need infrastructures. So we little bit need to exit from this confrontational attitude, because the real need is diversification and going to the point. The second message starts from the title of the conference, spiraling through the conflicts in search of opportunities. Here, I think that in this context, the big opportunity for our countries in the Mediterranean is the interconnection with an energy corridor with East Med area. I think there is a great potential. It is a great base, not only for, let's say, energy future, but again, to use energy this time for cooperation and not for creating tension.
Thanks. Very clear message there. Maria?
Well, let's say, if I have to say what I would like as a priority also from the government in this moment, is true that let's say a lot has been done, and what is going on with respect to natural gas infrastructure will probably serve all the need of Greece and largely of the region. So what we need now is a coherent strategy on how to transform these natural gas infrastructure in green gases infrastructure. Because as the minister said, these are assets that are brand new and they have 40, 50 years of useful life. We want to transition out of natural gas, but we want, let's say, to continue to have green molecules and also continue the role of Greece as a hub for green molecules. So we think it's important that it's not something that we expect to happen in 10 years or 15 years, but we need to build together let's say, a roadmap, also acknowledging that Greece has a competitive advantage in renewables, meaning it has a competitive advantage also in hydrogen production, and it has also a competitive advantage as a corridor to import hydrogen from, let's say, East Mediterranean Basin, from Middle East. So this is something that to give long-term stability also to private investors is something that we think is very crucial at this point in time.
Thanks very much, Maria. Mr. Hantavas?
Yes, we would like to welcome the statements by Minister Skylakakis. The fact that the government now is looking seriously on the ways to accelerate investments in storage really is helpful. On this, of course, I would like to stress out that we need to be cautious to avoid mistakes from the past, because non-controlled penetration of storage in the system may bring the same effects that we saw in the past in solar, the cannibalization between projects. And it's very important also to think of ways to transmit this benefit to the consumer by seeing lower electricity prices. And to do this, we need to enable competition. And to enable competition, we need sometimes to avoid creating monopolies that may have benefits in different technologies. So I think that the ministry already is aware of all these things, and definitely in the planning probably will take into account these conditions. We are optimistic that with the necessary regulation and measures, the situation also in curtailments will be stabilized, and the general crisis of investors' trust for renewables will be minimized and probably avoided soon.
Thank you. A brief final word, Antonis? 3 words.
What is important for investors is, again, legal safety, transparency, and lifting of barriers, of existing barriers for private investments. And again, clear rules also for this synergetic approach, because I have witnessed the many phases of energy transition. Now, I agree with Mr. Matana. It's not about having, again, a confrontational approach. Renewables are, of course, the future, but natural gas has its severe importance. And so there has to be a balance between that, and I think this summarizes what is also the outlook for the next years to come.
Thank you very much. We have to close the session, but I'm going to allow the minister to close it with a couple of words.
A final word. We are now, especially on the electrical system and in our gas infrastructure, very advanced in transition. And we are now facing the first problems of the new system that is going to be created. Curtailment, sometimes negative prices, great differences in prices, violent investment cycles in renewables that are going to come in the future. But the future is a better future in spite of these problems, because we are solving the problems of the past. That's why we now have the problems of the future.
Thank you. A good note to finish on, and please join me in thanking all our speakers.